Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Boker Griploc with a C, and it's an interesting knife. But first off, I want to thank an anonymous viewer who wished to remain anonymous for sending this little guy along. It's very interesting, and I wouldn't have gotten a chance otherwise, so that's great. Next thing, size comparison. This is actually not a small knife. You can see here next to the Spyderco Delica, yeah, it's not a small knife. Rat number 2. Rat number 1. Again, not a small knife. The blade length on this guy comes in, depending on how the cop wants to measure and how little they like you, it's right around the 3.3-ish area. So, yeah, it's not a small knife, but that's okay. Then, actually, this is a collaboration, I should mention, with G&G Hawk, Grant and Gavin Hawk, and they are, they're mad scientists. They make weird stuff in the knife world, and I love it. I love that they're doing strange things, and this is another strange thing. And it's actually similar to another strange thing that they did, which is the Beetle. The Hawk Knives Beetle is a custom, I believe, that they did some time back. A buddy of mine actually has one of these, so I got to compare the two. And this seems to be a production-friendly version of that basic idea here. And the whole, the idea behind this knife, what makes this knife interesting is, if you look here, this whole thing articulates. And so when you pull the knife out, the frame opens up and then closes again. But when you are gripping onto this knife, in order to close the knife, this whole thing needs to come up. Like this grip portion needs to pop up. And so when you are gripping the knife, actively doing cutting, it is very, very hard, although actually possible, for this guy to come closed on your hand. Because you are pulling this guy down. Basically, you are providing a force against this knife opening. And so that's kind of a neat idea. You end up with a knife that is not locking in any sense of the word. I can shut it very easily with one finger with no manipulation and whatnot. But it is absolutely locked in the hand. And actually, you can lock it supplementary using this little guy in the back there, which truly does lock it, but still, it's a neat idea. That's kind of the gimmick here, and so there we go. Let's talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little piece here. So the good side, you know what, I gotta say, the deployment action on this guy is great. You've got this little flipper tab in the front here, and we'll talk about that later, but it does make for a very compelling flipping action. And especially given that there is no detent or anything on there, which we'll talk about later as well, it still manages to fire nicely, because by the time you get it to here, the spring then starts working in your favor, and so it's sort of assisted, but it's not really. And it's very easy to close. It's an interesting little piece in that way. And so I appreciate very much the, well, frankly, that action is nice, and it's kind of an addictive knife to just flip around back and forth. Next thing, this does actually offer a finger guard right here. This little area here is curved up, which means that even, and I'm very consciously gripping poorly onto this guy, but even if you try and do that, chances are it's not going to hurt you too badly, because it's going to get stuck on your finger there, which helps and is always something that's good to see in a non-locking piece. Next thing, this has pretty good build quality, honestly. For a Boker Plus, this is doing well. It looks like it's layered sheets of aluminum. There are a lot of different elements to it. It is a complicated inner design. Do watch my disassembly video, which is less of a maintenance video and more of a how the heck does this thing work, to get a better sense of that. But that's the complexity I do have to admire there. The blade on this guy is also something I like a lot, because it's a nice practical blade shape, because you have a nice flat area here, you got some belly up in the front here, you got a point to it if you need it. It's got a nice look to it overall. Frankly, I don't even mind. It looks like it's very lightly blasted or something like that, but the finish on it is good. The swedge is nice. I like the look of this blade a lot. I think it's a nice, simple blade shape, and it works very well. So that's good. And I gotta say, overall, the knife is attractive to me, especially when open. This is not unattractive. This is a pretty knife. And so that's a nice thing. And then finally, this has a very nice blade-to-handle ratio. What I mean by that is, if we compare, for instance, these two knives, the Spyderco Delica and this guy, the Delica has this much blade in this much handle. This guy has this much blade in this much handle. There is relatively little, I feel like there's a lot of blade packed into this guy as a result of the fact that the tip can live way up here and whatnot. I like that a lot. And so, to me, all of that is the good. It's got a great blade-to-handle ratio. It's a very attractive knife, honestly. The blade itself is very, very nicely done. As pretty good build quality, all told, especially for being as complex as it is. As the finger guard there, it has great deploying action, and actually, I already said I like the blade shape. So let's go on to the great, which is that this is weird and innovative. Look, the Hawks always do weird things. That's kind of what they do, and I love it. They're the mad scientists of the knife world, and this is another example of that. This is a non-locking knife that is, for all practical purposes, locking. It's sort of in that same vein of the Pitts, Spyderco Pie in the Sky, the Three Rivers Nomad, etc., where the force of gripping it keeps the knife locked, but it's a different approach to it. And there's nobody else doing this. I mean, seriously, if somebody just set this down on my table with me knowing nothing else about it, and handed me this knife, I'd say, oh, the Hawks have something new. Because they're the only folks who would do something like this. And so I love very much that they've done something that is so completely outside the norm. I mean, even the flipper tab location, we'll talk about that, is a little bit weird. And the fact that you've got this secondary, this is just such a weird knife, and I appreciate that very much, and that's what makes this knife absolutely great. Let's talk about the bad, and on the bad side, first off, actually something that's not so bad. The price is okay. It's $90. That's a lot of money, especially for Os-8 steel. But the thing is, it is a weird piece. It is actually surprisingly well built. It is absolutely complicated with different springs, a bunch of different parts. I feel a lot better paying $90 for something like this than I do paying that for, a relatively boring plastic, Linalock sort of thing. And you know what? I'm not super bent out of shape about that price. I mean, Boker has done something weird here, and they've done it compellingly enough that I can't really object. So there you go. Next thing, the steel on this guy is Os-8 steel. Os-8 is not great. It's either barely adequate, barely inadequate. I'm not in love with it, but you know what? Whatever. No one's really buying this for a super, oh my god, everyday carry every day, cut down boxes, etc. sort of piece. There you go. Next thing, they did screw up the sharpening choil. This, you can see the plunge goes a little further out, so they've got a little bit of a smile on the back of the blade here. Not a big deal, just needs to go out a little bit further. Next thing, this is probably a knife that is too locking for a non-locking country. Both given the fact that it has this lock in the back there, which makes this actually a locking knife, and also, I mean, let's face it, this is practically speaking locked when you're gripping onto it there. And so I suspect that this is probably too locking for places like the UK or other countries with that kind of thing, and which makes this a little bit weird. It's like, okay, you've made a non-locking knife that's kind of locking, so it's not legal, but it's not. It seems to be in some ways a little bit of the worst of both worlds, and I almost wonder whether, omitting this guy in the back, although it is certainly a nice safety feature, might have caused them a little bit less legal pain. Next thing, this is relying very heavily on a couple of different springs. As you saw in the disassembly, there is not only a spring in the middle here, which helps to basically govern this locking mechanism in the back here, but there are two separate coil springs in the middle there that are providing the counter tension that snap this guy closed and open. It's a neat design, but that is very, very complicated, and indeed the knife itself is very complicated. As we saw during the disassembly, there were a lot of parts in here, there were a lot of moving issues, and if any one of them gets out of whack, you might have yourself a problem. And so this is not going to be an, oh my god, robust, jump out of freaking planes sort of knife, but you knew that. So I guess it's not a big deal. And then finally, on the bad side, the only thing I really have to object to, and I'm going to do this very carefully, is that this is a knife that feels like it's solidly locked right until it isn't. There's sort of a game of chicken here, of Russian roulette, where if you press the blade against there, it feels super locked, and then suddenly it lets go. And because of that, you almost get like a detent feeling, where it's like all this pressure builds up, builds up, builds up, and then suddenly it's allowed to let go. And I can see that being real unpleasant really quickly. And so if I was doing any kind of strenuous cutting, I would absolutely want to lock this guy up such that I have an extra margin of failure just in case. But still, that's kind of a weird feeling. A lot of your slip joints with the finger choils and whatnot, like the Spyderco UKPK, as there's more force applied to the back of the blade, you feel it against your index finger, and it's literally prevented from closing, whereas with this guy, it feels completely solid, and then suddenly, oh crap, this blade's closing. And so that's not something I'm super in love with, but again, if you're doing hard use cutting, this isn't the best choice, so it's probably not a real concern. So that to me is the bad, is that it does feel locked right until it doesn't, leading to an awkward game of chicken with rear blade pressure. It is pretty complicated, relying on some different springs. It's probably too locking for non-locking countries. They did botch the choil. Os-8 isn't super great, and the price actually is okay, but, it's not oh my god either. So, that's the bad. On the ugly front, there is only one ugly thing, and to me, it's pretty ugly, and that is the fact that Hold on. Gotta kill the heat real quick. Screw it. Sorry about the heat, guys. It's it's cold here in Michigan. But anyways, I'm pressing this little guy into the pocket. Absolutely pops this knife open. You can see here it's got this flipper tab on the bottom. And if we use this as a proxy for the bottom of the pocket, as I press this down, and especially if you're putting this in like a coin pocket or something like that, or a key pocket in your pants, as you press this down, because there is zero detent, any amount of pressure will start to pop this blade open. And honestly, that's really creepy. There is zero detent keeping this blade closed except for this spring, which means that linearly as you apply force, the blade comes out. And it doesn't lock closed. You can't use this little guy to lock the knife closed. And so as a result, pressing this guy into the pocket is a little bit of a dangerous game. Now, it is a tip-up carry knife, and so it should be pressing against the side of your pocket, but this was honestly a little bit creepy. It's probably not like dangerous, especially with deep pockets, but it did definitely creep me out, and it made me very reluctant to carry this guy all that much. And depending on how you carry, especially if you're using a key pocket or something like that, or you regularly do hit the bottom, this becomes a non-starter. And so to me at least, that is absolutely ugly, and it's not something I'm a fan of. So that to me is the ugly. It's probably not dangerous, but it absolutely is creepy. And so not a big fan of that. Final conclusions-wise, look, this is a nice knife. I love that it is very, very different, and indeed, it is very, very neat. But the thing is, I don't know. I love that it's being made. I love that they're doing crazy things like that. But between the complexity, the almost lockingness, the so-so materials and price, and this kind of creepy blade thing, I can't say I recommend it. And so this kind of falls into that category of this is a collector's knife. This is a knife that is really neat in principle and might be an absolutely great pickup if you are a knife collector. But if you're just looking for a daily driver knife, an everyday carry piece that you will carry and love and use and beat on for years and years to come, this is absolutely not your choice. So, I mean, yeah, there you go. I think it's a very nice little knife, but I can't recommend it for EDC. But nice choice for the collection, I suppose. Anyways, hope this has been interesting to you. Have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.